Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming. So last night, reports came out that President Trump is preparing to sign an executive order to abolish the Department of Education. Now, of course, the White House has tried to start walking it back. But let's be honest. There is no secret that they're aiming to abolish the Department of Education. They said so. Here's what Donald Trump said last month. Quote, "I'd like it to be closed immediately." So they're not backing off. We'll just, they're erratic as usual, but this is part of his campaign. It's part of what McMahon stood for, and we believe that they're trying to make it happen. This would be, if it happens, one of the most destructive and devastating steps that Donald Trump has ever taken. Who's going to be the victim? Americans' kids, America's school children. To get tax breaks for his billionaire friends and hurt our school children? I don't think that's what America wants. I don't think that's what America bought into. I sent my kids to public schools in New York City. Public schools are the bedrock of our country. I went to public schools. In fact...
And they don't always succeed, as you saw, most of the time.
We went to Madison High School together, and I think PS 197? Yes. Okay. But in any case, the 90% of Americans, 90% of students in the United States attend public schools, and every single district will suffer because of what Donald Trump is doing. Again, America, he's using your kids' education money to give tax breaks to his billionaire buddies. It's that simple. He's looking to find any money he can so his billionaire club can pay even less taxes. And this is why every single Democrat said hell no to the nomination of Linda McMahon, one of the only nominees in history tasked with destroying the very agency she's trying to lead. Linda McMahon wants to detonate the Department of Education. So why is she taking the job? Just to be destructive. The blast radius of this order will harm nearly every child, every teacher, every family, and every community. Taking a chainsaw to the Department of Education and undermining its mission to educate our next generation would be horrible for our schools, our families, the children Secretary McMahon is supposed to serve. And don't forget, defunding education means property taxes will go up across the country, particularly in suburban districts. If you look at this chart, the states that have the most to lose if the education department is dismantled are Trump states, and particularly rural states. In rural America, there's one school in the community. You undercut it, and education just dramatically declines. The Department of Education, as I said, is a lifeline for schools across America. Without it, rural schools, many of them would vanish, and schools will crumble at the foundation. And education is the best investment for a struggling community. Without good schools, without the funding to support these schools, children will be hurt, our country will be worse off, and the American dream falls by the wayside. Kids with special education in particular will be left out in the cold. We've struggled for years to give these kids a good chance out the window to help the billionaires. Class sizes will explode, job training programs will vanish, college will become more expensive and out of the reach for more middle-class kids, homeowners will be hammered with rate hikes. So you look across the board, they're just going at it with the Elon Musk chainsaw blowtorch approach. If the Republicans want to work together with us on real education reform, we'll be the first in line to do it. If there's things that are wasteful, show us what they are. But don't use the chainsaw to just eliminate the Department of Education and public education because you're gambling with our kids' future. Democrats will fight this awful decision every step of the way. Senator Sanders.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chuck. Elon Musk, the wealthiest person on earth, at the behest of President Trump, is now on the warpath against the working families of our country. Saving money by dismantling the Department of Education, which, by the way, is illegal and unconstitutional, so that the billionaire class can receive huge tax breaks, is terrible public policy and morally reprehensible. Mr. Musk, who is worth some $400 billion, and his fellow billionaires do not have to worry about the quality of public education because they send their kids and grandchildren to fancy private schools. So what happens to public education is not of great concern to them. But for the working class of this country, high-quality public education is an imperative if their kids are going to do well in life. And the cutting of funding for 26 million low-income and working-class students, many of whom are in rural states like Vermont, will be a disaster. Mr. Musk and his fellow billionaires don't have to worry about the high cost of college because they can afford to get their kids into any college they want. But that is not the case for the 7 million working-class families who depend on Pell Grants to get a higher education. Years ago, parents who had disabilities had no decent option as to how to do well by their kids. We have made progress in that area over the years. But if Mr. Musk gets his way, 7.5 million kids with disabilities may be unable to receive the services they need in a high-quality public education. What happens to those children? What happens to those families if those services are cut? The department also enforces our federal civil rights laws to ensure all kids can get a decent education no matter what their race, creed, color, or gender may be. And let's be clear, if the federal government ceases to fund the educational needs of working-class communities, that will mean higher local and state taxes to fill the void. In other words, shutting down the Department of Education would be a disaster for low-income and working-class families in every state of our country. Do we need to make the Department of Education more efficient? I believe we do. Do we need to destroy it and wreak havoc for working-class families across this country? Absolutely not. And let me conclude by simply saying this. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We should have the best educational system in the world. Among other reforms that we need to introduce is we need to attract the best and the brightest into teaching. Minimum salary should be $60,000 a year. We need to greatly strengthen child care, after-school summer programs. We need to invest in the mental health of our kids. We need to fully fund the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. Bottom line, our job is to protect low-income and working-class kids all over this country. It is not to give huge tax breaks to the billionaire class and the oligarchs. The American people must stand up and tell Trump and Musk, we must not dismantle the Department of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Senator. Well, this is a very personal issue for me. I'm the son of a public school teacher. I'm the product of the public schools. My children all went to the public schools as well. And as my colleagues highlighted today, the Department of Education plays a critical role in student success, from providing IDEA grants to support students with disabilities, to Perkins grants to support career and technical education, and Pell grants to make sure that Americans can go to college. Dismantling the Department of Education is also going to just absolutely open up the floodgates for this administration to privatize education, as Senator Murphy said. And funding that is taken away from public education, we know where that money is going to go. It's going to give tax breaks to billionaires. Newly appointed Secretary McMahon and Republicans in the past have tried to sell some of this program as school choice, but it's basically a voucher program, as Senator Murphy mentioned, which gives private schools private schools will then have the ability to handpick students and close their doors to everybody else. We've already seen this private school voucher program in many states, and we'll talk a little bit about Michigan, where Republicans were led by former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, when she attempted to direct taxpayer dollars away from public schools. Vouchers in Michigan is overwhelmingly unpopular and was overwhelmingly rejected at the ballot. Republicans then in the Michigan State House later tried to slash public funds for schools, for public schools, to provide tax credits for private schools. Over $50 million diverted away in that effort, and voters once again overwhelmingly rejected that attempt just a couple years ago. Meanwhile, as Senator Murphy said as well, this is unpopular. 68% of Americans want to boost public education funding and give our kids the education and career opportunities that they deserve. That is an overwhelming majority. Under this executive order, which we don't know when will come, but will likely come soon, it would not only eliminate federal resources for public education, but would also put more power into private schools to make decisions as to who gets education and who doesn't. We all know that these private institutions are going to privatize the bottom line. The needs of students will not be at the top. But perhaps most important reason we need federal Department of Education is to make sure that all students, no matter who they are, no matter where they live, regardless of their economic status, that they have access to quality education and an opportunity to be successful in life. I would urge my Republican colleagues to join us in this effort to make sure that we do everything we can to protect public education, the Department of Education, and give every student the opportunity to be successful.
Thank you, Garrett. Questions on this subject?
Mr. Leader, would Democrats, we've heard a number, obviously the Department of Education is something that you've dedicated this entire press conference to. The slashing of government agencies, we know Democratic lawmakers want to maybe put some constraints on things like this needing congressional approval, and they want to tie that to government spending in this latest continuing resolution. Would that be worth, would those DOGE cuts be worth shutting down the government over, as some of your colleagues say that they would?
The bottom line is Democrats are working to avoid a shutdown. If there's a shutdown, it's on the Republicans' back. They have yet given us their proposal. Yes.
Leader Schumer, your Democratic constituents are hoping to hear more from their elected leaders. Obviously, Republicans are in control of the government, but can you do anything else but message on these issues?
Yes. Look at lawsuits. Just yesterday, many NIH, cuts to NIH were rejected. We have filed over 100 lawsuits working with the AGs and working with independent groups. We've won 87% of them. We also intend to work on legislation. I had a call with, I thought it would be 500 activists. 3,000 got on the phone. And we are focusing in all of our states on the Republican congressmen and senators voting for the things that will be so unpopular, and we're going to get a chance to have them vote on it in reconciliation. Yes?
Have you heard any concern from constituents about how these cuts could affect other programs like school lunches, Head Start,
Yeah,
anything
people,
like that?
if you use this blowtorch to the Department of Education and eliminate it, kids are going to go hungry. They're not going to be, I don't know where they're going to get their breakfast, where they're going to get their lunches. The schools are going to be so hard pressed. And a lot of these programs are part of the Department of Education, as well as, of course, the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, Senator Schumer, up until yesterday, all the plans were to impound spending that had been approved by Congress and just ignore the Impoundment Control Act and sort of fight it out in the courts. Yesterday, Republican senators started pushing back on Musk and saying, hey, send us a rescissions package that can bypass a filibuster here in the Senate. Wondering if you think that that is the appropriate way for them to actually try to cut spending, and are you looking forward to those votes?
Look, first, we're having many ways to get votes, including reconciliation. Second, these programs are so what the Trump has proposed, whether it's tariffs or Social Security or Medicaid or tax breaks for billionaires, is so unpopular with the American people that the Republicans are ducking and trying to bob and weave and say, well, maybe we're for it, maybe we're not, maybe do it this way, maybe do it that way. Just the classic example. Don't have a town hall meeting, the Republican leaders told the Republican congressmen, because they're so unpopular. Day by day, the Trump-Musk DOGE program becomes more and more unpopular with the American people. The more they see it, the less they like it. Thank you.